Bakit parang maraming naging shortcut doon sa paggawa ng pag-aayos ng mga Lopez Law? Ang Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, huwag nyo tong ibenta, itong dalawang to. Pero ginawa pa rin po na ibinenta. Something is wrong with the loans sold by DBP to the SPV. Mr. Bosa, I don't think you are to judge what is because the law is very clear. Yung batas, malinaw. Absolute. Kailangan nagkaroon kayo ng eligibility. Bakit parang maraming naging shortcut doon sa paggawa ng pag-aayos ng mga Lopez loan? Sabi nyo kanina, hindi naman yun dahil sa collateral kahit hindi binigyan ng Maynilad. Agree. Sige ho, maganda yung business. Meron kang monopoly, duopoly sa pagbibigay ng tubig. Ikaw lang ang may control. Kasama mo ang Ayala sa kabilang banda at ikaw naman yung may-ari sa kabila. Pero ang usapan ninyo doon, magkokolekta kayo within 1 year. At dahil doon, nagkaroon kayo ng guarantee ng joint solidary signature. And yet, hindi nyo ginawa. Wala akong nakitang ganun. In the process of eligibility, sinabi na ng Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, huwag nyo tong ibenta, itong dalawang to. Pero ginawa pa rin po na ibinenta. Kanina narinig naman natin si Mr. Manyalak. In fact, dapat nga hindi na siya imbitahin dito dahil sa private side siya. Yung binenta nyo 1.66 billion, tinanggal nyo na yung waiver ng penalties and defaults, ang nakolekta lang natin is 1.69 billion. In 3 years time, nakabawi naman yung mga kumpanya. So, I don't understand the logic on this. And, I will call your attention, Mr. Rebosa. June 17, ang inyong legal gumawa ng study on calling the guarantee of Ben Press. What happens? Sabi nung legal, if DBP calls on the Ben Press guarantee now, will this extinguish Maynilad's obligation to the bank? Sinabi ho dito, malinaw. Hindi. We can call on that. Meaning to say, kasi Mr. Bosa, from the private banking point of view, naintindihan ko yung binabanggit ninyo. Pero from the government financial point of view, talagang nakikita ko yung mga shortcut at yung pagbibigay dito sa loans na to. From 10 billion to 3 billion. Huwag na muna natin sa amin Lopez loan, yun na po sa total, no? From 10 billion to 3 billion, at yung pinakamagandang loans ninyo, ibinenta ninyo at nilipat. That I cannot understand. Kasi nung nangyayari po ito, Mr. Bosa, nagkaroon din kami sa National Home Mortgage and Finance Corporation. Ang gumawa din ng study, Ernst & Young. Yung mga loans namin na kumukolekta na 70% and above, hindi namin binenta. Hindi ho namin binenta dahil alam namin may recovery. Pero yung 60%, 69% and below, kasi nga yung parang pinaka high side na niya ho ata is about 60% and below. Yun ang pinabayaan na namin. Based on the study of the Ernst & Young. But seemingly, in this particular case, and I'm looking at all the studies conducted, nagsalitan ang inyong legal, yung credit committee, TWG and Ernst & Young, sabi huwag niyong pakialaman yung those that have contracts with the government corporations, huwag natin ipasok dyan. And yet, ginalaw. Hanggang ngayon, Mr. Bosa, walang mapakita na letters on foreclosure or call on guarantee. Wala akong makitang dokumentong ganyan. So, I agree with you that it was to liquefy or to give support to the banking sector. But seemingly, in this particular case, something is wrong with the loans sold by DBP to the SPV. Mr. Bosa.
Mr. Chairman.
Sir, thank you. Thank you. You're not,
sa COMSEC natin, kung may breakdown tayo ng 9.556 billion na NPLs na binenta nila, meron ba tayong breakdown? O Lopez lang alam natin?
Hindi, meron.
Mr. Chairman, from the submission of the DBP, we have only the list of the
but no amounts
included in the 9.556 billion.
Mr. Chairman, while we're checking for the documents, I think Mr. Bosa will reply.
Yes, Mr. Bossa, you're recognized.
Sir, I just want to say, you're not going to see any notice of foreclosure on the Lopez loans, for that matter, the NPLs that were sent to the SPV, because there's no condemnation of the loan. It was a true sale. And also, may I again repeat the clarification by the BSP that when you sell to the market at the time without benefit of the certificate of eligibility, that's legal. The certificate of eligibility under the SPAB laws gives you tax exemption. Now, BSP is very, very strict to make sure there are no freeloaders. Kaya
Mr.
nga
Chairman,
po,
point of order.
ginawa
Mr.
ko
Chairman,
nila,
point of order.
if I may finish.
Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Bosa, I don't think you are to judge what is because the law is very clear. There has to have eligibility. What you are citing is the implementing rules of regulations that they made as part of the SPV Act. But the SPV law is very clear. The BSP is here. Ang legal po lang nandito. And they're saying that if you put it in the SPV, there should be compliance on the law. So I don't know.
May I just thank you, Congressman. But may I just dispute your point? The certificate of eligibility gives the seller the tax exemption, but does not prevent the seller to go into the secondary market. I think maybe, sir, to end the discussion, we can have the BSP again clarify it.
Mr. Bosa, magkakaroon lang po ng linaw yan sa korte. Once we make the committee report and the ombudsman will file a case, dyan makikita kung sinong tama sa atin.
May I remind the sponsor and the resource person to address the chair in your response.
Sorry.
So that we avoid this.
Yes, sir.
You know, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman,
Mr. Chair.
I apologize. Mr. Chairman.
I also apologize.
Si Mr. Barbosa kasi, pinababayaan ko yung mga salita niya because he was not part of the process before. Pero kung magsasalita siya dito on a statement of law, palagay ko mali. Kahit nga yung BSP sinabi niya I cannot judge whether it's legal or not. Let the courts decide. Pero ngayon, he will insist on a point and dispute the law. Kaya nga sinasabi ko, huwag tayo magdebate dyan. I will allow you. Pero if you will stand by yung statement mo on the law, sige, pag-usapan natin yan pag nag-file kami ng case. But I tell you 100% mananalo yung posisyon namin. It is not a question of eligibility. Pag dinala nyo sa batas, sa SPV law, you comply with the law. Yan ang sinabi ng Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, hindi sa akin yan. Attorney Lagadjo, tama po ba? Pag ginamit mo yung SPV law, dapat may eligibility sa Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas.
As of the last meeting, Mr. Chairman, with regard to the incentives, to the exemptions and the privileges granted under the SPB law, then you must have the certificate of eligibility.
Kung wala.
If you do
Kung
not
wala
have,
at ginamit mo yung SPV Act, kung wala at ginamit mo yung SPV Act, legal ba yun o hindi?
Again, Mr. Chairman, I will not say it's legal or illegal.
Sorry, yes.
What I can say is that in that case, there is non-compliance with the requirements of the SPB law. But then with regard to the privileges and to the tax exemptions, then you cannot make use of those privileges if you do not have the COE, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Pero tama po ba, Atty. Lagadjo, for the record na lang, absolute ang provision ng SPV Act. Yung law mismo wag yung implementing rules and regulations. Absolute that any account or loan, and if I may read to you the SPV law, para lang ho klaro for the record. Section 12, Article 3, transfer of assets to SPV. Letter B, the transfer of NPAs from a financial institution to an SPV shall be subject to prior certification of eligibility as NPA by the appropriate regulatory authority. Ibig sabihin, sinabi ninyo na non-performing asset siya, non-performing loan siya.
This provision, Mr. Chair, says that the transfer of NPAs from financial institution to an SPB shall be subject to prior certification of eligibility as NPA. So the use of the word shall is mandatory in that sense that if you are going to make use, again, as I've said, of those privileges and tax exemption, there has to be the
Huwag
certificate
ka muna
of
do
eligibility.
not add to the provision. Ang sinasabi niya, di ba, subject to prior certification of eligibility.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Tama. Ngayon, ba't tayo nagkakagulo, Mr. Chairman? Kasi later on, gumawa sila ng implementing rules and regulations. Ang sinabi nila dito sa Section 12, yung binabanggit nila na, eto yung muna Section 12, Notice and Manner of Transfer of Assets. Ang sabi niya dito, that all an FI that intends to transfer its NPA to NSB shall file an application for eligibility of said NPAs. Sinabi niya rin dito sa implementing rules and regulations, pero kinwalify niya sa kanyang definition dito. Sabi niya, a certificate of eligibility refers to the certificate issued by the appropriate regulatory authority as to the eligibility of the NPL or OPOA for purposes of availing of tax exemptions. Sa definition of terms tayo nagkagulo. Pero yung batas, malinaw. Absolute. Kailangan nagkaroon kayo ng eligibility. Ito nakakatakot, Mr. Chairman, kasi nagkaroon na naman tayo ng fees. Yan ang una nating bantayan. Ang pangalawa nating bantayan, which did not happen here, in fairness, marami sa mga may utang, bumubo ng sarili ng SPAV. Tapos ibibenta doon, bibili nila ng mas mura. In fairness, wala naman ako nakita dito na nangyaring ganyan. But is this not correct? Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, marami kayong nakikita mga ganitong at least movement in the industry. Yung utang niya 1 billion, binili ng SPAV ng 500 million, siya rin paling nasa likod ng SPAV. So nagkaroon siya ng diskwento sa kanyang utang. So Mr. Chairman, again, I apologize for that. Pero wag muna tayong magsabi dito ng illegal dahil kung ako tatanungin, illegal yung nangyari. And simple lang naman yung aking sinabi. Magtanong kayo sa Pag-ibig. Magtanong kayo sa National Mortgage Finance Corporation, GSIS, SSS. Hindi sila makabenta na mas mura not unless meron silang SPV. Dahil may book value, magkakaroon tayo ng graft and corruption. Parang yan, Mr. Chairman, sa lupa ng gobyerno. Di ba magbibenta ka ng lupa ng gobyerno, 1,000? Ang sinabi nung ginawang market study, hindi mo pwede ibenta ng 900. At kung meron ka pa ngang, sa record pa nga natin sa gobyerno, whichever is higher, the book value of the land, kung 1 billion na yung lupa, or the fair market value, whichever is higher. Grabe yung ating ginogovern dito, kaya hindi pwedeng lumusot to. For the private banks, however, pwede. Diba, wala naman tayong pakialam sa kanila eh. A bank now will sell it, yun yung sinasabi yung transfer of credit, assignment of credit. O yung utang mo sa akin, ibibigay ko sa kabila. Pwede yun, pero tayo hindi. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Defensor. Next to interpolate is the Honorable Joe Jimenez of Zamboanga City. Congressman Jimenez.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chair.
You may
Let me state. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me begin by stating a fact na na-experience natin. Mahirap magtanong sa committee na to, mga issues and concerns natin, considering na yung mga dokumentong pumapasok din, minsan a day before the hearing. So para sa akin, medyo yung time to prepare nababawasan din po sa atin. And secondly, gusto ko lang din ma-emphasize sa committee natin na malinaw sa atin, I think except for some bank officials, in particular to DBP, na ang Pablo, tama po rin sinasabi ni Kong Mike Defensor, hindi lang pinag-uusapan dito yung tax incentive, kundi po pinag-uusapan din dito, sinasabi ng batas, kung ano yung mga requirement na dapat sundin ng especially ng state-owned banks natin bago pumasok sa mga transaksyon na sinasabi natin. Napakalinaw kung ano yung mga requirements, kung ano yung mga conditions, kung anong essentially unang-una yung declaration of policy ng batas natin. And I just wonder why, Mr. Chairman, and how, for example, ang DBP, they can apply the law to some transactions, pero in their own, they can also decide to set aside the SPAB law to other transactions. So yun po ang medyo malabo dito. And what's very clear to all of us, especially when this hearing began, is that out of the 9 billion pesos na pinautang ng DBP, ang nakolekta lang nila is by way of sale is more than 3 billion pesos. If that is not grossly disadvantageous to the government, then I do not know what it is, Mr. Chairman. So na kanina I support the motion for subpoena of Kong Remulla. But let me just clarify, Mr. Chairman. Isa sa mga personality sa transaction na ito na controversial is po yung Lehman Brothers. If not for the position paper, if I'm not mistaken, coming from Chairman Manyalak, until now, we do not know kung ano talaga ang naging participation ng Lehman Brothers, what do they gain from all this. So ang tanong ko lang po, kasama ba sila sa subpoena for invitation? Any representative? I know nagsara na po ang Lehman Brothers.
One is already
are they
here.
still part-
Is now in the Zoom. Congressman Jimenez, they can answer. He can answer for you your questions. He's now here.
Okay po. Yes po. And just to clarify lang po to DBP, I have a question to DBP. They're saying na wala hong condonation sa transactions na ito, pero a while ago we heard na mayroong palang condonation, mayroong write-off na ginawa. I don't know in particular kung ano yung transaction na sinasabi nila. And DBP is also saying na, if I get it right, 64% ang nakolekta nila. Where are these facts coming from, Mr. Chairman? If it's very clear to us, sa taong bayan, na again, yung punot dulo ng kontrobersiya nito is that sa 9 billion na pinautang ng DBP, 3 billion lang or more ang nakolekta nila. So can we get a straight fact from the DBP to begin with, Mr. Chairman? Ano ho yung transaction na sinasabi nila may condonation po?
Yung
Mr. Chair, may I the questions of the honorable congressman?
I think I think he was not
Yes, sir.
involved in the previous hearings.
Yes, sir. May I just
He wants to know why it happened. The 9.6 billion was why it came to that point that it was sold to 3 point something billion.
Mr. Chair, as explained in the position paper submitted by DBP to this honorable committee, what happened was that DBP transferred or sold all of these assets or accounts to PI, first Lehman Brothers, and then subsequently PI1 and PI2 assumed the rights of Lehman Brothers. Now, the 9.55 billion, Mr. Chair, is the total value OPB of all the accounts sold to Lehman and then PI1 and PI2. 3.88 billion is the bid submitted by PI1, Lehman Brothers, and later PI1 and PI2 for this portfolio of assets, Mr. Chair. So I hope I answered the questions of the honorable congressman.
Hello, Congressman Jimenez, do you have any follow-up question?
Yes po. Again, yun po ang naging source of controversy natin. More than close to 6 billion pesos ang nalugi po tayo sa pinautang po ng DBP. And yung second question ko po, it was made mention earlier na may condonation po sa mga ilang transactions. May we know kung anong transaction po
I
was
think
it
that
referred to?
the interest and penalties yung condonation. 'Di ba? Tama ba? May ano yun eh. May board resolution eh.
Sir, Mr. Chair, I think the question is with respect to the specific accounts na po, indeed as presented, and the records will show that there were condonations. However, it was also
Condemnations on what?
of
Penalty.
penalties. Yes.
Penalties.
Yes, sir. However,
May question ako. Si Lopez Group lang bang binigyan ng condonation ng penalties during that time, that period? Or there are other companies?
we are sorry, Mr. Chair, but we cannot provide the information.
So until you come back to me with your official answer, I would presume sila lang. So until you rectify that, we will put that as part of the report, our committee report, because that's the only evidence given here by the Honorable Defensor that there were waiver and of penalties and late fees charges. So if you can, in the next hearing, if you could further research during that period from 2001 to 2006, is there any other company given waiver?
We will do that, Mr. Chair,
Okay.
to the best
But
of our ability,
let
sir.
me warn you that if you do not give that answer, I will put that part of my report, committee report.
We will do our best,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
So, Congressman Jimenez,
Yes. We have a representative from Lehman Brothers po.
yes. He is Carlos Manyalak. Sir, Mr. Manyalak, Congressman Jimenez would like to ask a few questions.
Yes, sir. Ready for questions.
Yes po. Just to guide this representation po, yung loans, without going to specifics po, magkano po ang biniling loan ng Lehman Brothers po from DBP?
Yung tinatawag po na principal balance was 1.69, and then the purchase price was 1.06. This is specific, sir, to the Lopez Group only loans.
Well, siguro just to cite an example na lang din po. And from your yung binili ninyo, magkano ho ang nakolekta naman po ng Lehman Brothers sa loan na to, reaching 1.69 billion pesos?
The total collections po from all of these loans over 3 years until either sold or resolved was approximately 1.25 billion from the DBP portfolio, and there was an additional 200 million on the central CATV, but that asset was bought from a third party separate from DBP po. That's what our records indicate. So 1.25 out of the DBP Lopez Group portfolio is what our records are showing po in terms of collections, total collections.
So yung collections na sinasabi din po, took how many years po?
It was from the date of the purchase, which is 2007, until 2010. The only potential exception, there may have been a little bit more collections from central CATV. Our records are not clear, but the aggregate total, which is 1.25 billion, is complete. Yan na po talaga yung nakuha sa lahat ng loans.
So just to clarify, 1.69 ang value nito, and ang nakolekta ninyo po is a total of 1.450 billion.
1.25 from the DBP portfolio, and there was an additional 200 related to the central CATV loan, but that was from a separate seller po. Kasi po at that time nagbebentahan na sila yung exposure na to.
So that the extra 200 million pesos, just to be clear, we will not include it in the 1.69 billion.
Yes po. Correct.
So it only took you 3 years to be able to collect 1.250 billion
Correct po.
pesos.
Yes, correct.
Which brings us to the point, Mr. Chairman, as earlier stated by the leaders of this committee, also by Vice Chairman Remulla, by the sponsor of the resolution, Kong Mike Defensor, and of course, yung chairman natin, Kong Mike Aglibay. Kung naging patient lang po siguro ang DBP to a certain degree, and siguro mas marami tayong nakolekta from the 9 billion pesos. Just look at the facts given to us by Lehman Brothers. They were able to collect more than what they paid for only it only took them 3 years. So kung ang palagi natin sinasabi ng dahilan ng DBP for doing all this is because of the Asian crisis noon, I wonder what will happen sa panahon natin ngayon, Mr. Chairman, considering that we are also under crisis. And yung sinasabi nating fees law, how it will be applicable, especially sa mga malalaking korporasyon, is yet to be determined. And sana naman po, yung fees law natin, hindi naman maulit na to some transactions, i-implement natin, i-adapt natin, pero to other transactions, mukhang sineset aside natin. So that will be all in the meantime, Mr. Chairman. And maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Honorable Jimenez. For the second round of the sponsor.
Very quick, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Honorable Defensor.
Kasi po nabuo na natin yung benta ng DBP, magkano yung pagkabenta niya, pagbenta ng Lehman Brothers. I don't know how to place this question kasi alam ko madaming creditors no ng Lopez Group of Companies, but if Mr. Quezon will be amenable, just a quick question. Binili niyo po ulit itong loans ninyo from Lehman, di ba ho, ng 1.25 billion. Doon lang po sa Lehman.
Mr. Chairman, it was settled. Hindi ko na binili.
1.25 billion.
I don't know the amount. I'm not very sure about the amount, but Mr. Tirona, who's on Zoom,
Okay,
will be able to.
if Mr. Torona can quickly reply.
Mr. Tirona.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. Could you please repeat the question just for me?
Yes,
to be
Mr. Torona, we just wanted to clarify. You were able to buy all the loans at 1.25 billion from Lehman Brothers?
No, I'd like to correct that. We did not buy the loans from Lehman Brothers, Mr. Chairman. We settled the loans with the SPV. Okay, it was a repayment to the SPV.
Okay, so it's settled po to ng 1.25 billion.
I will have to double check on that. But the loans for Maynilad and for Sky, I think were 100% repaid under the restructuring and the rehabilitation. I'll have to check on the buy and tell recovery. But for the Ben Press, we confirmed that we were able to settle at 60% of the face value of the LTCPs.
Opo. So ang ibig pong, ang kinaklaro ko lang po, no, of the 1.25 billion na sinettle nyo po sa Lehman Brothers, it covers 100%.
I think 1 billion 600 1 million 1.06
1.069, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman.
Hindi 1.2.
Hindi po. Ang Lehman po ang bumili. 1.25 po ang pagkakabili nyo kay Lehman. Ang pagsisettle nyo.
Hindi 1.06. Yun ang sinabi.
No, Mr. Chair, Lehman Brothers bought the loans at 1.069. So si Lehman po yun.
Hindi 1.2 si Lehman.
Hindi po. Apo, Mr. Chair, kasi di ba siya po yung bumili, tapos si Lopez Group of Companies, sabi ni Lehman, na naibenta niya ng... Opo, yes, Mr. Chairman. So naibenta niya po ng 1.25 billion. From the point of view of Lehman. From the point of view of Lopez, nasettle niya po at 1.25 billion. Tama po, Mr. Tirona?
Iba-iba pong settlement, no? But If
Aggregate na po.
with your permission, I'd like just to give a breakdown, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yes po.
Okay, so if we concentrate on the Benpress outstanding LTCPs, the amount was 157.95 million. Okay, and we were able to settle this at 95.3 million, which is roughly about 60% of the face value. For the buy and tell, based on the rehabilitation, of which DBP participated in the rehabilitation, but eventually the rehab court approved a rehabilitation based on what they called a sustainable debt and an unsustainable. And that was completed or fully paid for the loans bought by the SPV under the rehabilitation of buy and tell. For Maynilad, the amount in the rehabilitation was roughly 810 million less an upfront payment of 72 million. So that's about 700 something million, which was again repaid through the rehabilitation of Maynilad. For the Sky, Your Honor, I'm sorry, but I cannot give the exact data. My colleague, Mr. Ventosa of Sky Cable, who was not invited today, but he was present during the last meeting. But I understand that that has been fully paid.
Okay, so yeah, Mr. Torona, ang sabi nga po ni Mr. Manyala kanina of the Lehman Brothers, of the total loans, you were able to settle 1.25 billion. So parang nangyari, I'm not sure if you treated this as a package, na ito yung pagkabili nila, o isettle nyo na lahat. So you itemize how it was settled, but basically it was 1.25 billion.
Mr. Chairman, it was not a package. It was an individual company that went through the repayment of the loans. No? Like in the case of Benpress, it was Benpress that negotiated with them, and we reached an agreement for the settlement. For buy and tell and Maynilad, those were through the rehab court.
Okay, so the question now is, magkano nyo po naman after you settled all this, how much were you able to sell it? Based on this perspective lang ng Lehman, wag na po yung ibang creditors ninyo.
Sir, why will we sell it? We settled the loan. We paid for the loan. Those
Yes.
are our loans. So we did not sell it.
Mag-focus po tayo sa Maynilad. Na-settle nyo po yung 810, di po ba? Yung 710.
710 was part of the rehabilitation, yes.
Okay, magkano nyo po naman nung inayos nyo at naibenta nyo?
Hindi po namin binenta yung loan na yun because that was under the rehabilitation. Which,
yung shares nyo po, under Maynilad?
Under Maynilad, under the rehabilitation, we had to exit Maynilad, and turn over the company to MWSS, who then reprivatized it. And it was MWSS that was able to do the reprivatization for the new owners. So we did not sell the loans.
Okay, ito po naman apples and oranges. Hindi wala naman pong comparison. So how much were you able to sell the shares?
We did not sell the shares for Maynilad, Your Honor. What we did was we surrendered our shares and we effectively took a write-down of our equity and advances in Maynilad, amounting to 4.4 billion. So we did not sell the shares. We just had to surrender the company or surrender our shares so that we could exit the company.
And for buy and tell, which ganun din po ba nangyari? Because ito pong Maynilad is different dahil meron siyang franchise with the government. But in the case of buy and tell,
for the case of buy and tell, the rehabilitation program was ongoing until a third party offered to buy the debt being held by the creditors of buy and sell. We were not involved in that offer by the third party, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Tirona, one question lang po. Bakit po doon sa Maynila yung joint solidarity signature, natanggal po yung guarantee ng Benpres on that?
Actually, the recommendation, first of all, Mr. Chairman, that was a decision by DBP and the other creditors. No, our surety was called on. Now, the court receiver actually was the one who handled the conditions needed for the rehabilitation of Maynilad. We were not involved.
But of course, you agreed na matanggal po yung joint solidarity signature, of course, no? As a business business proposition.
Well, that is the decision of the creditors, Your Honor.
Yes. So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Tirona, is it correct to say mahirap na po nating i-locate or i-put in place kung ano ba yung naging benta ng Lopez Group of Companies dun sa loans within Liman? Kasi ang pwede lang po natin makita is from DBP to Liman, Liman to sa inyo, sa pagsettle nyo ng loans, but as to how you exited each and every company, if ever you exited, kasi yung iba naman po hindi kayo nag-exit, medyo mas komplikado na ho yung usapin doon.
Well, yung sa Maynilad at sa Bayantel po, nandun po naman sa rehabilitation plans nila lahat ng actions na ginawa po yan for our exit po.
Yes, yes. Pero hindi ho natin magawa na apples and apples eh. Magkano nyo binili sa Liman, na-settle sa Liman, at magkano yung inyong pagkakabenta? Kasi kung ang pagkakabenta nyo 1.6B, edi tama po si Secretary Harry Roque. Parang ang sinasabi po kasi Secretary Roque, kumita si Lopez, kumita si Liman, pero si DBP lugi. Yun po yung kanyang thesis nung pinakita niya yung presentation.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to correct that hindi ho kumita ang Lopez sa transaction po. Nalugi pa nga po. Doon sa Bayantel, for example, ang write-off po namin sa investment namin sa Bayantel ay umabot ng 19 billion. Yung sa Maynilad, ang write-off po namin ay 4.4 billion. That was for both equity and advances in Maynilad. So if that is what you were asking about the exit, that cost the group of companies 19 billion and 4.4 billion respectively, Your Honor.
Well, Mr. Tirona, for the record, kasi po yung binabanggit ninyo is the transaction itself na parang sinabi ninyo, ito yung Bayantel, nalugi kayo. Tapos po dito sa Maynilad, of course, marami naging problema on collections, gumawa kayo ng mga piping, rehabilitation and all that, and nagka-problema kayo. Pero I'm not speaking on, kasi ako, on my part, I cannot say kung ano yung naging benefit from the Liman to where you sold it. Pero I guess si Secretary Roque was talking about the 1.6 billion. Yung loan po na nakuha ninyo at yung binayaran ninyo. Yun siguro po yung sinasabi niyang gain supposedly. Other than that, I cannot see how we can put together the gains in selling these loans, Mr. Tirona.
I don't have any comment on that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maraming salamat po, Mr. Tirona.
Thank you, Honorable Defensor. A few questions for DBP on the submission of your required documents for today. Previously at the first hearing, you told us that there were 2,000 borrowers that fall part of the 9.6 billion SPAV availment. But the list that you provided, there is only less than 200. There are less than 200 companies here. So what happened to the 1,800?
Mr. Chair, may I explain?
Yes.
Yes, there were more than almost 7,000 accounts sold to SPV. However, only the names submitted only those are corporations and conglomerates as required by the subpoena, Mr. Chair. The rest are individuals and therefore not covered by the subpoena, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So are we okay with that? There are 2,000 borrowers. These are the only companies because the subpoena says companies and
Mr. Chair, if I recall, it was the Honorable Garbin who requested documents. I only seconded or amended it to issue a subpoena, but I'm not sure the intent. Because yung sa amin po, yung resolution, very clear naman po na nakatuon dito sa, this was again, a resolution last year at nakatuon po dun sa Lopez loan.
so with regards to the list, can you further provide the committee the top 5? Because I went over the list for the 2006 SPAV availment, and I only noticed around 4 big companies. So I do not want to prejudge which is the biggest among the, or is the Lopez Group the biggest among the 9.6? Are they the 4 biggest companies or in the top 10?
They're among the biggest, Mr. Chair.
They're among the biggest.
Yes, sir. May I just correct the figure I gave earlier?
Yeah.
There are 2,775 accounts.
Yes, but you only gave here less than 200.
Yes, sir, because those are the only
Companies.
corporations and conglomerates in that portfolio, sir. The rest are individuals.
What is the average of those 2,700 accounts? What is the average loan principal outstanding? What is the average amount?
Mr. Chair, we regret that we do not have the information at this time.
Yes, because we cannot we can further digest this submission until we see who are the top corporations that availed of the loans. Yeah. So can we get the amounts? Can we get the amounts corresponding to this 100 plus companies?
We can provide it in the next hearing.
Yeah. Please do both for the 7.5 billion present day and for the 9.56 2006. Thank you. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Honorable Defensor.
Yes, to be fair with Mr. Naubos, because earlier with an exchange on this issue, may I ask him, Mr. Bosa, are you still there in Zoom? Is Mr. Bosa?
Nasa restroom daw si
Okay, so we can wait. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Honorable Defensor.
Yes. Because it would seem to me.
Is there already daw in Zoom?
Okay, Mr. Bosa, are you there?
Yes, sir. At your service po.
Mr. Bosa, kasi po kayo nagtataka, for the past several hearings, hindi naman kayo nagsasalita about the eligibility. Ngayon po nagsalita na kayo dito at nagklaro kayo ng mga puntos.
Yes, sir.
So that is your position, Mr. Bosa?
That's right, sir. My position is, and I don't know how the BSP upholds this, but I've heard them say it, that the certificate of eligibility only gives the tax exemption. Because at the time of the 2006, there was a secondary market through which not only DBP, but all the other banks were able to sell, to dispose of their NPL po. And as far as I'm concerned, there were a lot of transactions that did not have the privilege po of the COE. So in other words, all of those transactions, by inference, I believe, are not illegal. They just didn't have the benefit of the tax exemption, which the certificate of eligibility that the BSP gives grants them po. So I guess there were a lot of transactions. I was in the private sector at that time. And private sector po yan. And I guess it bounds also the GFIs. It was not an illegal act po. If you had, di ho ba, ang COE. Kaya meron no tayong dalawang Lopez transactions that had the benefit of the COE for which we got some tax exceptions. And there were the two others na wala po. But that's, to me, is not an illegal act po. And I don't know, maybe we could ask BSP to clarify because I heard their statement. I can't even understand it. Thank you po, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Bosa, okay naman po ako dun kasi tama naman kayo. Again, I reiterate, ang private sector is allowed. So wag na natin mag-argue. Ang sabi
Okay
naman
po
po ng Bangko Sentral, sabi niya, hindi, pag walang compliance, wala. Pero sabi din, sige, if you do that, may eligibility. Simple lang naman po ang tanong ko, Mr. Bosa,
Yes,
you
sir.
are the head of one of the biggest financial institutions, if not the biggest of the government financial institutions. Bakit hindi niyo po kausapin ng presidente at ipaliwanag kung ganyan ang inyong paniniwala? Bakit po tayo nagpapagulo dito? Dahil ang view ko po, ang aking pong pananaw, and I hope this could be tested in court, mag-file ng case talaga, bawal. Bawal ho. Tama ho kayo, sa private sector pwede. Siyempre kami naman dito, nandito lang naman kami sa mababang pulungan. Kayo po, director dyan. Andyan po si Chairman Romulo, Secretary Dominguez, Senior Finance Secretary. Ba't hindi niyo po pag-usapan kung ano tong kaso na to? Because the President has been talking about this 3 years ago. Yun po, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you po. Honorable Mike, maraming salamat po dyan sa guidance po ninyo. And I really appreciate our dialogue today and also, with due respect also for our chairman for, forgive me if sometimes I interject. Thank you po sa inyo lahat.
Thank you. Well, yes, Mr. Chairman, I just like to clarify, this has been the statement of the President for 3 years. And in 2011, this was stated during the investigation of the Senate. Mr. Bosa, is it not true that there are other government offices conducting a study on this matter?
At this point in time, sir?
Yes. I mean, maybe within the year, may gumawa po ng pag-aaral tungkol dito.
Saan po? Sa Lopez loans po?
Yes, the Lopez loans at yung pong 9 billion. The Lopez loans.
Sir, wala. Kasi sir, alam nyo sir, tapos na transaction na po yan eh. Ever since I got into DBP, which is almost 3 years no, hindi ko natin na pag-usapan po na yan eh. Until of course, this is brought up.
Yes, I'm sorry, President Bosa. So wala pong gumagalaw at nag-aaral ng particular sitwasyon na to from the executive?
I cannot say because I'm only just a member of the. You mean the executive branch of the government, or as in DBP?
The executive branch of government, Mr. Bosa.
Sir, I'm just confined as to my role as president and CEO of DBP po. So to my knowledge, Honorable Mike, I cannot say what is going on beyond me.
Thank you, Mr. Bosa. Kasi po, nabanggit ko again yan because I'm referring to the statement of Secretary Roque. That was a detailed study. Yung binanggit po ni Mr. Manyala ngayong umaga, na ngayon lang natin nalaman yung exact figures, was already being presented by Secretary Roque. And nung una, hindi ko alam kung saan nanggaling yun, but now I realize, nanggaling po yun sa, may mga data siya na nakikita. And again, I reiterate the fact na ang Pangulo nagsalita na po dito dati pa. Diba? And, all I'm asking is, we do not make a judgment. Although may position po ako my personal position was that illegal po yun. Yung certificate of eligibility, hindi kayo nakuha, illegal yun. If you sold it in another process, in another way, Kung iba po yung pamamaraan, pwede po yun. Kasi yun nga po sa gobyerno, medyo mas maigpit sa atin. Ngayon ang Pangulo nagsasalta na rin dati pa ng ganyan. Diba? Na sinasabi niya nga, at ito pinaliwanag na namin, yung 6 bilyon na pagkalugi, hindi siya write-off, hindi siya condemnation. Pero yung pagkakalugi talaga ng gobyerno. Ngayon it would seem na ibang posisyon ng DBP or meron kayong ibang posisyon, you explain it to the President. Diba? It should not be a burden of this committee to make a study and then you have a different interpretation of what should transpire. Diba? Dahil ang Pangulo mismo nagsalita dito and it was a take-off ng abs-cbn hearing. Now, we are independent of the President. Pero at least kung mapaliwanag nyo sa kanila, magkakaintindihan tayo kung ano talaga yung naging proseso. No, Mr. Chairman, having said that, I maintain the position that the committee should not only, kasi po I understand the Ombudsman is already conducting its study now, from what I've heard, but the committee should not only make a legislative recommendation, magkaroon po tayong rekomendasyon ng legislation, but as what the Honorable Remulla and the rest of us discussed before sa PhilHealth deliberations, that we file a case so that to test. Because in the FIS law, at yung po yung nakakatakot, there may be, again, abuses of the SPV law. Maraming salamat, Mr. Chairman.